My 22 million younger sister, 18 female, dropped out of college and moved in with her boyfriend, and my parents are threatening to disown her. When I found out my younger sister, Emily, dropped out of college and moved in with her boyfriend, I was floored. I knew things hadn't been going well for her at school. She'd mentioned struggling with some classes and not feeling motivated. But I didn't expect it to escalate to this. My parents were even more blindsided. They've always had big dreams for her, and it's not like they didn't push her in the right direction. She was always the golden child, the one with the most potential, so when she decided to drop out and move in with a guy she's only been dating for a few months, it felt like a bomb dropped on our family. My parents' reaction was explosive, to say the least. When Emily broke the news at dinner, the atmosphere changed instantly. My dad went silent, which is always a bad sign, and my mom's face turned a shade of red I've never seen before. After what felt like an eternity, my dad slammed his fork down on the table and muttered, "Are you serious, Emily?" His voice was quiet, but the anger in it was impossible to miss. My mom, on the other hand, didn't hold back. She went into full meltdown mode, yelling about how Emily was throwing away her future, wasting the sacrifices they'd made for her education, and how disappointed they were in her. Emily sat there, calm, like she had expected this reaction. She didn't say much, just listened while they vented. At one point, she tried to explain her decision, saying she wasn't happy in school and didn't see the point of continuing when she didn't even know what she wanted to do with her life. But that explanation didn't fly with my parents. They've always been the type who believe in following the straight and narrow path. Graduate from college, get a good job, start a family, and do it all in the right order. Dropping out of college, especially when you're so close to finishing, was like spitting in their faces. Then, the real bomb dropped. Emily told them she'd already moved out of the dorms and into her boyfriend Jake's apartment. That was the final straw for my mom. She threw her napkin on the table and stormed out of the room, tears in her eyes. My dad stayed behind, staring at Emily with a look that made my stomach twist. He didn't yell, but his words cut deep. "If you walk away from this family, don't expect to come back," he said. "We've worked too hard for you to just throw everything away for some boy." Emily didn't flinch, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. She got up, walked out, and that was the last we saw of her for days. In the days that followed, our house was filled with tension. My parents kept talking about how they were going to disown her, cut her off financially, and let her deal with the consequences of her own choices. Part of me understood where they were coming from. They'd invested so much in her education, and they saw her decision as a betrayal. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like they were being too harsh. Emily is only 18, still figuring out who she is and what she wants. It's not uncommon for people to change their minds about college, and while moving in with her boyfriend seemed like a rash decision, it wasn't the end of the world. I kept thinking about how Emily must have felt, sitting at that dinner table, getting blasted with our parents' anger. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting there, silently enduring their disappointment, knowing that no matter what she said, they wouldn't understand. She's always been independent, stubborn even, but this felt different. It felt like she was trying to escape something bigger, like maybe the expectations placed on her had become too heavy. I wanted to reach out to her, but I didn't know how. Every time I picked up the phone, I hesitated. What if she didn't want to talk to me? What if she thought I was on our parents' side? A few days later, I finally worked up the courage to call her. When she picked up, her voice sounded tired, like she'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I asked her how she was doing, and she gave me the standard "I'm fine" answer, but I could tell she wasn't. After a long pause, she opened up. She told me that she'd been miserable at college for months. She hated her classes, didn't feel like she fit in with the other students, and was constantly stressed about her future. She felt like she was just going through the motions, doing what was expected of her, but not what she wanted. When she met Jake, everything changed. He was older, more experienced, and made her feel like it was okay to question the path she was on. He didn't push her to follow a traditional route, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a choice in what her life could look like. Dropping out and moving in with him wasn't a decision she made lightly, but it was the first time she felt like she was in control of her own life. She knew our parents would freak out, but she didn't expect them to threaten to disown her. Hearing her side of the story made me realize just how different our experiences with our parents had been. I've always followed the rules, done what was expected of me, and as a result, I've never had to face their wrath the way Emily has. But that doesn't mean I haven't felt the pressure. I know how suffocating it can be to live up to their expectations, and I get why Emily would want to break free from that. At the same time, I couldn't help but worry about her. Moving in with Jake seemed risky, especially since they hadn't been together that long. What if things didn't work out? What would she do then? I tried to voice my concerns without sounding judgmental. I told her I understood why she dropped out, but I was worried she was rushing into things with Jake. I didn't want to see her get hurt, and I didn't want her to feel like she couldn't come back home if things went south. Emily listened, and for the first time, she didn't seem defensive. She admitted that she was scared too, but she felt like she had to take this risk. She couldn't keep living her life based on what other people expected of her. She needed to figure out who she was, even if it meant making mistakes along the way. After that conversation, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was proud of Emily for standing up for herself and making her own choices. On the other hand, I was worried about what would happen if things didn't go as planned. But most of all, I was angry at my parents for pushing her to this point. I understood their disappointment, but threatening to disown her was taking it too far. I tried to talk to them about it, but they were still too hurt to listen. They kept saying that Emily had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Weeks went by, and the situation didn't improve. Emily was still living with Jake, and my parents were still threatening to cut her off. Every time I visited them, the topic of Emily came up, and it always ended in an argument. They were adamant that she was making the biggest mistake of her life, and that tough love was the only way to get through to her. I didn't agree, but I didn't know how to convince them otherwise. Eventually, I realized that I couldn't change their minds. All I could do was support Emily in the way she needed. I started visiting her and Jake, trying to build a bridge between her and the rest of the family. Jake seemed like a good guy, even if their relationship was still new. He genuinely cared about Emily and wasn't trying to isolate her from us. Slowly, Emily began to open up more, and while she was still figuring things out, she seemed happier than she had in a long time. In the end, I came to the conclusion that this was Emily's journey to take. Whether or not my parents ever came around was up to them, but I wasn't going to turn my back on my sister. She may have taken a path that none of us expected, but that didn't mean she deserved to be disowned. She's young, she's figuring things out, and I'm going to be there for her, no matter what. Because that's what family should do, support each other, even when it's hard.